From ruthless killers to cunning manipulators, these women strike fear into the hearts of many. So buckle up and get ready to meet 15 women who terrified the world. Number 15, Bonnie Parker. Born in Texas in 1910, Bonnie Parker became notorious for her involvement in bank robberies across the American South with her partner Clyde Barrow. Their exploits during the Great Depression were romanticized in films like Bonnie and Clyde, which starred Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. But the real story is far more chilling. Over the course of their 2-year crime spree, they took part in at least a dozen deadly shootouts with police and their victims. Before meeting Clyde, Bonnie had already been arrested for shoplifting, and her family was deeply ashamed of her behavior. However, after marrying him, her criminal activities became much more extreme. The couple went on a killing spree, murdering everyone from police officers to ordinary citizens. They were eventually killed by police in Louisiana in 1934. Number 14. Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness was an American serial killer who was active in the early 20th century. She earned the nickname the Black Widow of Indiana due to the mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths of her husband and several of her neighbors. Despite being only 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing just 140 pounds, she was a formidable opponent and was believed to be responsible for murdering over 40 people. After the death of her husband, Peter Gunness, she began to prey on wealthy farmers in her area, stealing their land and possessions. The exact number of her victims remains unknown, as she vanished without a trace in 1908 after setting fire to her farmhouse, which contained the bodies of several family members. Her remains were never recovered, and neither was the loot from her alleged crimes. To this day, she is considered one of the most notorious female criminals in American history. Number 13, Irma Gracie. Irma Gracie was a German woman who served as a guard at one of Germany's infamous concentration camps between 1942 and 1945. She was known for her sadistic behavior towards the prisoners and earned the nickname the Beautiful Beast due to her ability to appear sweet and harmless when necessary. However, behind closed doors, she was responsible for torturing and overseeing the killings of thousands of innocent people. Gracie used her position of power to inflict pain and suffering on those in her care, often taking pleasure in the fear and misery she caused them. After the war, she was captured and put on trial for her crimes against humanity. She was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging in 1945. Although she had the option to appeal her sentence, she chose not to and was executed at the age of 22. Number 12, Phoolan Devi. Phoolan Devi was an Indian outlaw who became known as the Bandit Queen after robbing and killing several policemen. Born in 1963, she had a difficult childhood and was married off at a young age to a much older man. She soon became the target of her husband's brothers, who repeatedly raped her. In response, she escaped and joined an armed gang of dacoits or bandits. Under the leadership of her lover, Vikram Malla, she carried out a series of daring raids on wealthy landowners, stealing large sums of money and jewelry. Eventually, her gang grew to include over 100 members, and she became known as the Robin Hood of India for her willingness to help the poor and downtrodden. However, she also earned the enmity of the police, who labeled her a dangerous criminal. In 2001, she was shot dead outside her home in Uttar Pradesh. Number 11, Ulrike Meinhof. Ulrike Meinhof was a German journalist and activist who co-founded the Red Army faction, also known as the Baader-Meinhof Group, in 1970. This far-left terrorist group was responsible for a number of attacks in West Germany, including kidnappings, bank robberies, and murders. Meinhof played a significant role in planning and executing these attacks, which aimed to destabilize the government and bring about a socialist revolution. She was also involved in the kidnapping of 2 important figures, Arbeitgeber President Hans-Martin Schleyer and German trade unionist and politician Rudi Dutschke. As a result, she was charged with numerous crimes, including hostage-taking, bank robbery, and murder. Meinhof escaped from prison in 1979 and fled to Lebanon, where she lived until 1983. However, she was caught and returned to Germany, where she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She died in 1976 while in custody under mysterious circumstances, with some believing that she was poisoned. Number 10. Griselda Blanco. Griselda Blanco was a Colombian drug lord who became known as the godmother of cocaine during the 1970s and 1980s. She was one of the first women to gain prominence in the drug trafficking business, and she built up a vast fortune through her involvement in the Medellin cartel. Blanco was responsible for ordering the deaths of dozens of people, including rival drug dealers, police officers, and anyone else who threatened her business. She was also known for her lavish lifestyle, which she funded with the profits from her drug sales. However, she was eventually caught and sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2004. She was released in 2012, but was soon killed in a drug-related shooting in Cartagena, Colombia. Number 9. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was an American serial killer who murdered several men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. She claimed to have acted in self-defense, claiming that the men had attacked her while she was working as a prostitute. However, many believed that she was a cold-blooded killer who targeted strangers for her own gratification. Wuornos was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. She maintained her innocence throughout her trial, and her case sparked a debate about the death penalty. Ultimately, she was executed by lethal injection in October 2002. Despite her claims of innocence, many believe that she was guilty and that she received the punishment she deserved. Number 8. Charlotte Corday. Charlotte Corday was a French woman who assassinated the revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat during the French Revolution. Marat was a controversial figure who had become increasingly radical in his views and had used his newspaper, Friend of the People, to incite violence and hatred against his enemies. Corday believed that Marat's actions were endangering the revolution and that he needed to be stopped. On July 13, 1793, she entered Marat's home and stabbed him to death in his bathtub. Although she was quickly arrested and put on trial, Corday refused to apologize for her actions and claimed that she had saved France from terror. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by guillotine. At the age of 24, she became one of the first victims of the French Revolution to be executed. Number 7. Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman who lived in the 16th century and is believed to have been one of the most prolific serial killers in history. She was known as the Blood Countess and was accused of torturing and murdering over 600 young women. It was rumored that she bathed in the blood of her victims in an attempt to maintain her youth and beauty. Despite the gruesome nature of the allegations against her, Bathory was never put on trial and spent her remaining days living freely in Hungary. This was likely due to her high social status and the fact that she was able to bribe the authorities. Today, she remains one of the most notorious and feared women in history. Number 6. Myra Hindley. Myra Hindley was an Englishwoman who became infamous for her involvement in the Moors murders, along with her lover, Ian Brady. Between 1963 and 1965, the couple, along with another man, David Smith, kidnapped and murdered 5 children from the Manchester area. Hindley played a key role in the killings and was known for her manipulative and sadistic behavior towards the victims. After the crimes were discovered, she and her accomplices were arrested and put on trial. Hindley was sentenced to life in prison and spent 37 years behind bars before being released in 2002. However, she died just a few months later at the age of 60. Number 5. Mata Hari. Mata Hari was a Dutch exotic dancer and courtesan who became famous for her beauty and charm. However, she was also accused of being a double agent during World War I, betraying secrets to the Germans. Despite having no previous military or intelligence experience, she was arrested by the French authorities in 1917 and charged with espionage. Although the evidence against her was circumstantial, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. She was executed by firing squad in 1917 at the age of 40. Some historians argue that she was actually innocent and that she was used as a scapegoat by the French government to deflect criticism for their own failures in the war. Number 4. Mary Tudor, Bloody Mary. Mary Tudor was the first Queen Regnant of England and Ireland. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Mary came to power in 1553 after the death of her half-sister Jane Grey. During her reign, she faced opposition from both Catholics and Protestants and responded by launching a campaign of persecution against the latter. She ordered the execution of hundreds of Protestant leaders and scholars, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Her actions were seen as a betrayal of the religious reforms that had been introduced during the reign of her father, who had broken with the Roman Catholic Church and established the Church of England. Mary's persecution of Protestants ultimately backfired, and she is remembered as one of the most brutal and tyrannical rulers in English history. Number 3. Zheng Yisao. Zheng Yisao was a Chinese pirate who operated in the early 19th century. She was the wife of a Chinese naval commander who defected to the pirates, and together they built up a fleet of over 300 ships. At its peak, her fleet consisted of over 20,000 men, and she became one of the most successful and feared women in maritime history. Zheng Yisao and her crew targeted Chinese, British, and Portuguese ships carrying valuable goods such as silk, porcelain, and silver. They also plundered coastal towns and villages. Despite her success, she was eventually captured by the Chinese authorities and given a noble title and fortune, allowing her to keep her fortune. She spent her remaining days running a casino and fortune-telling business. Number 2. Boudica. Boudica was the Celtic queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain around the year 60 AD. She is known for leading a rebellion against the Roman Empire, which resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Romans. After the death of her husband, King Prasutagus, Boudica led an uprising against Roman rule, targeting the cities of Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium. Although the rebellion was ultimately crushed and Boudica disappeared from history, she has become a symbol of resistance against oppression. Some legends claim that Boudica survived the rebellion and lived in exile in Gaul, while others say she took her own life. However, these accounts are not supported by historical evidence. Number 1. Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt and one of the most influential women in ancient history. She was born in 69 BC and was known for her intelligence, charisma, and political acumen. Cleopatra was fluent in 9 languages and was well-versed in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, and she used her knowledge and skills to great effect, becoming a master of diplomacy, war, and political manipulation. Cleopatra had relationships with 2 Roman leaders, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, which gave her access to the vast resources of the Roman Empire. However, she was ultimately defeated by Octavian, who became the first emperor of Rome, and she took her own life in 30 BC rather than submit to him. Despite her tragic end, Cleopatra's legacy has endured for centuries, and she continues to be celebrated as a symbol of female empowerment and political savvy. Which of these women terrified you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.